Welcome to Audacity Works, a podcast inspired by and dedicated to the working artist, the creative entrepreneur, and generally, doing the damn thing. This exists on the premise that the world belongs to those who have the audacity to believe that their lives have value. This is for you. Welcome to Audacity Works. I am your host, Rachel Strickland, and this is episode number 101. And today, well, it wasn't today, we did it several weeks ago, I interviewed my dear friend, Dr. Mel Hobart-Beaumari, who is a naturopathic doctor, as well as a climber, and we met in college at UNC Asheville, and so I'm going to just have to take a second here and acknowledge the disaster that Western North Carolina is experiencing right now. All of the people that I know and love in Asheville have reported themselves safe, but the landscape is going to be changed forever. It was unprecedented. So I just had to take a second to give a shout out to all of Western North Carolina and in particular Asheville, which is very close to my heart and where I met so many of the people that ended up being the foundation of myself as a person, which includes Mel, absolutely. Asheville, I hope that you're not okay, but I hope that you will be. If you're able and you want to help, I'll put a link in the show notes to some disaster relief. And if you're not, because not everybody can, and I certainly understand that because of the system that we live in, now might be a nice time to make a gratitude list. If you have water and cell service and electricity and somewhere to live, and just enjoy those things. Enjoy your life and enjoy your home. Remember that essentially your joy is a form of protest. Without further ado, my Mel, my Snarkle, and my unofficial medical encyclopedia. Please enjoy. So today I have Dr. Mel Hobart-Beaumari. I'm saying it terribly, but we can just call them Dr. HB. And they're a primary care physician who practices in Seattle, Washington. They hold a naturopathic doctorate degree and did a teaching residency with a strong focus on community health. Their current practice has a little bit of everything, but a lot of women's health, gender-affirming care, gut health, and pediatrics. They also continue to teach and lecture on a regular basis. Outside of medicine, they're an avid rock climber and try to get outside as much as possible. Respect. Their route to medicine and climbing was circuitous and started with a short-lived but precious semi-career. I'm just going to go ahead and say career as a modern dancer and sometimes spent homesteading in the mountains of North Carolina, which is a very tiny paragraph to summarize a universe. Hi, Mel. Welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
I am so excited to have you here. We will try not to ramble on incessantly. No, we won't. Though. We are going to. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the first questions that I like to ask people is, do you remember when we met? Do you remember meeting for the first time?
Oh yeah. I totally remember meeting you. And the funny part of this story is like, I heard of you before I met you.
No, you didn't.
And oh yeah. Well, so my college roommate, 80, like beloved, like love of my early life, was like in this like very phase of life. And like one day she came home and she was like, Mel, oh my God, I have like been to this place. Now this place was like your dorm room on, I think the 4th floor of Founders, where it was just like, yeah, it was like 407, beautifully decorated, just like fey everything. Like, I don't know. I'm just imagining like velvet covered couches. This might be right. And it was just like the most beautiful land she had ever been to in a college dorm. And she was like so entranced. And she was like, you have to go there. You have to go to this place, right? Like you and Christy were just like holding court in this like magical fey land, right? And so like, that is like my like intro to you. But then the like actual moment of meeting was in dance class where you and I both missed the same day. And then like we had seen each other, but then we were like assigned to do like a little duet together for, I think it was Kathy Myers was doing like a collaborative choreography. And so it was like, well, you guys missed collaborative choreography day. So you put together this little, however long little solo. And that is where the like little pixie stompy stompy wake up lion choreography came to be, which like in my mind was like a lovely turning point in like which you stopped being 100% fairy princess and got like a little more lion-y.
Yeah. The lion exists because of you. You saw it and you were like, oh, this part is also here. And I'm like, oh, thank you.
Yeah, well, it was like, I mean, it was so perfect. You were this like beautifully trained modern dancer, but like based on our body dynamics, like it made more sense for you to lift me, even though I'm taller. And it was just like, oh, this is the natural way of things. Like, so it was a very fun thing. But that was my like proper meeting of you. But the legend of Rachel already existed, thanks to Amy.
That was the first of many collaborations. Like, okay, so I didn't say this, but I think the context is clear. We met in college at the University of North Carolina at Asheville, and then went on to create. How many pieces did we make together? Like 10?
Yeah, I think that like CD we have of our choreography has like between 8 to 10 pieces in it. And then of course, like we were in other people's choreography together as well. So, but I think our collaborative thing was probably at least that much.
Yeah, I've definitely created more with you than I have with any other single human being. And so that first collaboration that Mel was talking about, I believe that was the famed John Mellencamp. Do you remember?
That was later. That was our first full solo piece we did together where we couldn't find music, and so just put on John Mellencamp, and like it all came together perfectly. Which is like maybe choreographic technique advice of like, if you don't have your music, pick the most ridiculous thing possible, and if you can choreograph to that, you're good to go.
This is solid advice. I'm going to stand by that. I don't think we actually used that in the very end, but it did get us to the place of like, okay, well then we'll do this. And
our whole choreography fell into place, just like goofing around to that, to Wild Nights repeatedly.
Plus it was fun. It was fun. Remember fun when everything wasn't so serious all the time?
I don't even think we knew how irreverent we were being with that song. We just sort of
it was unironic. We were just having a good time. So on that vein, I was curious, out of all the pieces that we made, does any stand out to you as a favorite?
I mean, we have such like a broad range of pieces, right? In terms of like very serious modern dance, very comedic, almost sort of like cabaret-esque cake eating on stage kind of history. But I think my favorite piece and my favorite performance of the piece was a fringe festival piece that we did that was like probably like our most athletic piece. It's the one where we started in a cabinet on stage where we'd been for the whole first part of the act.
Chilling in the cabinet for like an hour.
Yeah, we just like sat in a cabinet for an unknown amount of time and then just jumped out and like basically battled each other modern dance style. Like it was a piece with like a lot of like really aggressive lift. Like I remember figuring this piece out was like, what if I just run at you and throw my body sideways? Like, can you catch me? Answer yes. Great. It's in. And I think that at that point too, I was really trying to like push us on like footwork and like not just lifty. Isn't it so pretty when bodies move together? So I was leaving our Pilabolus era, getting technical. But the performance I'm thinking about, like, I can't remember how many we did, but it was like multiple shows per day. And in one of them, our music didn't play, or the wrong music played, and then it stopped. And we just kept going. And there's a lot of body sounds when you're like run through your body. So the whole thing just ended up being like breath sounds of us just sort of battling each other on stage in this really like lovely athletic piece. And everyone afterwards was like, that was amazing. Like, I've never seen dance in silence. We're like, yeah, well, the music didn't play and we just kept going.
Just the sounds of percussive body smacking as we
exactly
beat the
a lot of
crap
like
out of each other.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that one stands out to me too. As well as, honestly, I have such a fondness for cake, which was the more comedic piece that we did, and in it, like, I would go buy this really huge piece of chocolate cake from, I think it was from Old Europe, because they had the most delicious chocolate ganache cake ever, and it was this about the size of our head. And Mel would come out like looking like $1,000, and then I would come out behind them all schlumpy, eating cake out of my hand. And at some point, Mel makes me spit the cake out. That's like chewed up. It gets caught in my hair and it's just dangling there. And then I pull it out of my hair and I offer it to the audience, and some motherfucker ate it. It was so nasty. The middle of the piece, I was like, oh, I think I totally broke character. Cause I was like, oh, you nasty. I can't believe you ate that.
Only happened once. That cake had like been like shoved down your top at one point as you're trying to hide it from me. It had like been in your mouth. Yeah, no, that was like a special audience participation moment that neither of us saw coming.
I even met that dude like a year or so later, and he was like, I'm the guy that ate the cake.
One who ate the cake?
Yeah. And I was like, wow. Now I don't remember anything else about him, where we were meeting. But like, I ate the cake. I'm like, respect, honestly. That was gross.
I mean, you're a part of his life now.
Forever.
He got your cooties, like forever. You're in there.
Okay. So I think because of the time that you spent homesteading, so tiny background, didn't you have a double major in German and dance?
I did, yes.
Okay. And which, of course, did not necessarily directly prepare you for your life as a physician. So
yeah, true.
At some point, you had to go back to school to learn chemistry and get, like, all of the more advanced science things under your belt. At which point you were homesteading on the top of a very long mountain with a terrifying driveway that took about an hour to get to.
I like that you've doubled the length of this drive just based on the switchbacks.
It was momentous and harrowing,
a lot of
a journey. Yes. A very I know they exist elsewhere, but in Asheville, you know you're going to a location when there's more than one switchback. So can you talk a little bit about homesteading, and are you able to work that into where you live now, not up in a mountain?
Yeah, no, I don't live in the mountains anymore. Although I work in the mountains. Like I live in Seattle, but I practice in Issaquah, Washington. So I just like literally get on I-90 and just like drive for the mountains in the morning, with the thought that maybe one day I live out there, but TBD. So yeah, I mean, I don't know that I ever would have left that mountain if I hadn't sort of been like kicked back into the world to get a little more work done. But I think that the opportunity to really have a couple years of my life be really synced with like harvest season and like seasons, and just having that space to connect has totally informed my practice. And I think that, how does it work now? Like yesterday, I like went into the woods and like foraged 10 pounds of chanterelles because that's what you do.
Jealous.
When fall comes early. Well, don't be too jealous. It's happening because we're having an early fall, which is very sad for Seattle.
Chanterelles are delicious.
Chanterelles are delicious. I got like 10.5 pounds yesterday. So I think that a lot of, what I do now is like, I mean, like I live in a really like lush little yard of like, you know, I really like just like sink into like what's around me, like the park around me, like this the space I garden, and just spend as much time in nature. But I also think about that a lot. Like it affects my practice of medicine, especially in Seattle. I'm like, well, we got 3 months of sun-drenched mania, and then we have 9 months of surviving the cool drizzly damps, in which it is dark, you know? And so just thinking about seasonality in that way, like still totally plays out, you know, in a lot of ways. Like maybe one day I'll be like a witch on the corner of the woods and people can like trade me like chickens and eggs for medical care. But
I have no doubt. I have absolutely no doubt.
It's still the dream, right? It's still the dream.
Lifelong.
Just be the witch on the edge of the forest.
So, Mel is a Southern witch like myself, and necessity dictates that they live and practice in places where naturopathic medicine is both, you know, allowed and not like literally thought of as witchcraft.
That's only where you live. I think South Carolina and Tennessee are the only places where
and Florida. I just looked it up. Apparently,
Florida's
it's
weird
illegal.
too. Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah, it is an odd thing, right? Where like instead of having like federal licensure where you just like travel state to state and everything is the same, it's so different. Like Washington state has this like immense scope, right? Where like I'm a primary care provider. Like I write everybody's prescriptions, I do their pap smears, I order all their screenings, I put in all their referrals. Like I do all the things that every other doctor in this state does. Right. And then if you move to a different state, like you have to figure out what can I do and not do here. And so I totally am a little bit trapped, you know, in other states. And in part, like I went to school thinking like, I'm going to be a witch doctor. This is going to be great. And then I was like, oh no, the value of like being in the conventional care setting, integrated into everyone's specialists and like able to like bill their insurance for my services. Like if you pay for insurance, please don't pay out of pocket for me. That's terrible, right? Like just ended up being more important than I thought it would be going in.
Yeah, I got a question that I think this is a good time to ask of you, which are, what are some myths about being a naturopathic medical doctor that you would like to dispel?
I mean, I think that it's really difficult to like categorize all naturopathic doctors into like one group, right? Of like, we don't have quite the same extent of specialized training as like a MD or a DO would have, in that we all sort of get this like general practice care education and then you specialize later, but our residency system is less formal. And so I think there's a huge amount, right? Like there are people who are naturopathic doctors, and by which I mean like they went to medical school for like 4 years and then hopefully did some like residency or like post, you know, school training of some kind before going into private practice. Like not the people who got like an internet certificate in naturopathic medicine. Like that's not the same thing. You know, but there are people who went into this because they want to practice fully outside the medical system. And then there are people who are fully integrated into the medical system, working in like federally qualified health centers and hospital settings and things like that. So I think just the idea that like all naturopaths even have like the same scope or the same practice area is pretty flawed. And so you just like need to know what you're up to, in the same way that like, you know, all doctors are inherently different. But I think that like, you know, a lot of people come in because they like don't like Western medicine, right? Like they're here for the alternatives, and they are like, they probably have been advised many a thing that they should do by a medical doctor of some variety. And they're like, no, I'm not doing that. That's not the way. Like, I'm here because you're going to tell me something different. And then secretly my superpower is being like, oh no, you should take that medication. That medication will save your life. Like, here's like a giant pile of studies that say, if you take this medication for 2 years after your heart attack, you will not die. Like 50% improvement, like in lack of dying, you know? And so I think that like, I don't hate Western medicine. I think Western medicine is super useful. Like my model is like, Western medicine is like putting out a forest fire, right? Like if the forest is burning near your house, you want helicopters dropping water, you want people cutting fire breaks, you want intensive intervention. And then naturopathic medicine is like forest maintenance. It's like going around and picking up the sticks and like maintaining a fire break and like doing all of the things that like promote the ability of you to not get sick in the future, to like minimize the effect that illness has on your body. Like we need both of those things. And so I think the idea that it's one or the other is really flawed. I think that we ideally have all of it, right? Like I'm a huge fan of botanical medicine. I love herbs. And if herbs could do everything human beings needed to do to stay alive, like we would not have invented medications. We just wouldn't have needed them. And yet we did need to often extract one tiny part of a plant and like multiply it until it's like 1,000-fold the strength and then give that thing, right? So I think maybe that's my naturopathic medicine myth, is like, we don't hate Western medicine. We fit really well in the medical system. And it's for everybody, right? It's not just for hippies. Like you can have a naturopathic doctor and like get all of your standard medical care.
Like a pap smear. Oh my God.
Like a pap smear. Exactly.
That I couldn't listen. I was hoping that you would say exactly what you said, because I knew that I wouldn't be able to say it so eloquently, but and that's, I learned it from you, because okay, Mel can't be my doctor because they live in another state, but that doesn't mean that they don't get lots of texts and calls.
You're on the official friends and family plan.
Tell me what to do. Should I take this medicine? Oh, yes, I should. Okay, great. Thank you. I'll be doing that. So on the botanicals, as my friend Kat had asked if there are any gentle herbs that you would recommend for sinking back into a parasympathetic nervous system state when you can't calm the fuck down.
Yeah, so I think about two main categories of herbs when I think about parasympathetic nervous system function. I think about nervine herbs, which are going to be our nerves that have an affinity for the nervous system. And many of these happen to be calming herbs, probably because our nervous system most often needs calming.
Yeah.
But there are some more stimulating ones. But, I would think about like skullcap and milky oats, like chamomile, like passion flower, tulsi, holy basil, like all of those are like so gentle, right? Like drink a cup of tea, one of these, like you can formulate pretty safely with all of those, and you can like play around with them too. There's so many awesome like nervous system calming formulas that are out there on the market too, or you're just like, oh, here is a lovely, like calming little like group of herbs. But the other thing I would think a lot about, other than just like nervous system, like hush hush, like here's some like milky oats and skullcap to calm you down, is like I would think about like exactly right. Well, it's like our nervous system needs a little help. We live like this is not how we evolved to live, right? Like we didn't evolve to like get in a car and like hurtle at like 60 miles down a highway towards other things coming at us 60 miles an hour that our brain is going to clock as a predator. Like we didn't evolve for this, man. The other thing I would think about is like adaptogen kind of family of herbs too, that are more going to be focused on like regulating like adrenal function and helping with like appropriate cortisol regulation. And obviously like I'm giving no one medical advice right now. So like talk to your own peoples, like obviously not your doctor. But I really love ashwagandha for this. Like ashwagandha is helpful for sleep as well. So I often do like evening dosing of ashwagandha for folks who are like needing a little help to kind of get like cortisol in the right space, like get a little more like restful sleep in there. I use a ton of rhodiola too. It's sort of the flip side of that is like rhodiola is pretty energizing, but it's still going to help with hormones. It's going to help with cortisol regulation. And that's kind of like a take it in the morning. Here's some like internal sunshine, so that you're not feeling like you're having to like turn it up to 11 just to get everything done, right? Because part of that is just burnout too, of like once you've like turned your system up to 11 just to function, like, yeah, you functioned, but like, you're kind of like grinding a little bit at that point. So kind of thinking about like, can we have like reasonable energy production rather than like I drink 10 cups of coffee to do it. Energy production.
Definitely never been guilty of that.
No, none of us have ever done that.
There was a short period of time where you were drinking coffee and I wasn't, and you were like, what's happening? The world doesn't make sense.
No, like my mental image of you is like gulps of coffee.
That is how I made most of my friends in college, making them coffee.
Indeed. But now I'm like over here drinking mushroom coffee and it's disgusting and not even the same. So I mean, you can make it taste better, but we won't pretend it's real coffee.
Right. Just for those listening, obviously I edit these myself, so in the show notes I will list out those lovely botanicals that Mel just listed. Is there like a brand that you really like? I know your knowledge is probably restricted to brands that can be purchased in the United States, but
I mean, I think you can also like ship these things internationally pretty easily. Oh, this is fun. Like normally I'm like lecturing in medical schools or like for like CME where like you can't say brand names for reasons. I'm like, that rule doesn't apply right now. No. Amazing. I really like Wise Woman herbals. I think Herb Farm is a really great company. Wish Garden has a lot of really lovely formulations and actually gives like reasonable dosing as well on things. And awesome. So if we're thinking about herbs, those are some of my top That's few. Great. Gaia herbs also. Gaia's old school, like Brevard, right outside Asheville. Their stuff is awesome.
Okay. Well, so I'm going to be putting all of brands. The links. Thank you so much. That's like, wow, this is like gold.
Well, I was like, that's like a huge thing, right? Of like, I bought my herbs on Amazon, and I'm like, is it even the herb you thought it was? And did they store it in like a temperature controlled warehouse? Answer, no. Like, is it a heat sensitive herb? Answer, yes, they all are. You know?
Oh shit. Okay.
Like, I think that's one of those things, right? When we think about like, does botanical medicine work, right? Of like first we have to standardize that people actually are taking the thing they think they're taking at the dose they think they're taking it. And that's not something we have like super broad control of in the United States.
I will never forget you teaching me about essential oils because like I love essential oils because they smell nice. And that was the extent of it. But I always thought of aromatherapy is like, oh, okay, that's cute, but sit down. Where's the real medicine? And then you taught me about a word that I can't remember correctly, and how can you take over so that I don't make an ass out of myself right now?
Well, I'm kind of wondering what I told you because I have like kind of two different like soapbox feelings about essential oils. On the one hand, like I hate them so much because they are such intense concentrates of really, really beneficial plants that would be medicinally effective at low doses, right? Like a single drop of like rose essential oil is like 1,000,000 roses. Like that's inappropriate, right? Like you like pack this, like I've made essential oils, right? Like you like pack this like giant still with like all of this herb and then like 3 drops of oil come out. It's immense. It's so concentrated. So if like the plant you're like looking at essential oil of is like even slightly endangered, like it's just pure evil in a bottle.
Got it.
But also don't eat them. For the love of God, do not put them in your body. It's too much. Also don't put them directly on your skin. It's too much. There's like a few, like you can put like lavender or tea tree oil on your skin. It'll be fine. But a lot of them burn. And my patients find this out in very comedic ways and then tell me about it. Or come and show me their horrifying rashes from when they took a bath with like, all of this like essential oil in there. But the cool thing about essential oils is that like when you smell essential oils, because it's volatile oils, they will actually like ride the olfactory nerve into your brain and like have very profound effects in there. So like the actual smelling of essential oils 100% does affect your brain. Like they go into your brain. Which I think
that's
is lovely.
What you
and
told
cool.
me. Yeah, it penetrates the totally blood-brain barrier.
Yeah, I was like, it just rides the nerve on in, which is like so lovely. I mean, there's so many uses too, right? I'm like, for essential oils, like, and I just think like we got to be responsible. People don't know. like just how much plant that is in a single drop. And then other people tell them to like put it in their water. Don't put it in your water.
Oh, good Lord.
Like, would you put, well, it's like the lemon. Like, you just do like a drop of lemon essential oil in your water. I'm like, just put a slice of lemon. Don't put like 700 lemons in your water. Just put one like little slice of a single lemon.
You never did enjoy waste.
Well, I mean, like also like totally. Well, like there can be harm too, right? Some are like kind of caustic, right? And so you're like putting essential oils internally that are like going to like inflame mucous membranes in your digestive tract. Like there's things can go wrong. Some essential oils lower the seizure threshold. One of my instructors had a story about one of his patients. I can't remember what. It was like rosemary oil and something else. And she was like doing high doses and she literally like had seizures as a result. Like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
The only thing I remember from this lecture was him just like joking, like, Rosemary, take me away. But like literally, like seizures. So, you know, like maybe don't like muck around with it.
Okay.
Like, just sniff them. Sniff them. Do a little like steam inhalation when you got a cold. Like inhale some nice eucalyptus oil, put it in your shower. Like just it's meant for inhalation.
Not ingestion.
Not ingestion. Don't eat them.
Thank you.
Or do it knowing you're doing it for like pharmaceutical grade effects, basically. It's not gentle.
I think it's probably the same thing that you were saying about the botanicals is true of the essential oils, that a lot of them are probably like heavily diluted or not necessarily, you know, the real thing.
Totally, right? And there's like risks there too. Like there are these like if you ever like buy like a bottle of kava, it'll be like don't take this for more than like 3 weeks or 1 month, and like this product like may cause liver damage and all of those pieces. And I'm like, a lot of that data comes from product contamination too, or like the wrong plant in the same family being ingested accidentally. And so just like knowing where your stuff comes from matters a lot.
Don't get the cheapest thing from Amazon.
Don't get the cheap stuff from Amazon. Yeah, no, don't.
This is such good advice.
Amazon is not a reliable apothecary. Just don't.
No problem. I think this is a good time to ask. My friend Sin asked, "What is a daily must do?" Which is a very hard question to answer, I imagine, other than, you know, drink water and poop.
I was gonna say, like, the amount of time I spend like suggesting to people that they like drink water is immense. Like a patient like got me a sweatshirt that said like drink water, fight racism. Like I forget what else it said, but like she was like, you changed my life with water. And I was like, meh. I'm like, I exist to tell you the wisdom of your grandmother. I'm like, you need to sleep. Like you need to sleep enough. You need to eat food. You need to eat enough food for what you're doing. Like you need to have like a moment in your day that is like meditative or calm and peaceful. Like you need to drink water. If you don't poop every day, make that a new goal in life.
Pooping every day. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, yeah, I was like, drink water, poop every day, get lots of sleep, like have something you do that's enjoyable, even if you only do it for like 2 minutes. Like talk to another human, make physical contact with another human. Handshakes count, eye contact counts.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I never thought about that.
We are social animals. Like we regulate our nervous systems with other people, right? Like introvert, extrovert doesn't matter. Like you co-regulate with other people. Your nervous system is designed to have like an inwards looking self and an outwards looking self. And you need to look out at other people and see them looking back at you. It's good for you.
I never thought of eye contact as touch, but it is.
It is.
I love that. That's so exciting to me. Wow.
I love your face right now.
I'm having a very dazzled moment because I'm like, oh my God, Eureka, that is so true. Oh. Right. So
yeah, well, like physical touch. Yeah, if all else fails, eye contact, right? Like physical touch is obviously very well researched and very important. And it's not always entirely feasible at any given moment to be physically touching another person, but like eye contact is like pretty available. Like you could just go to the corner store and buy something and like ask the person behind the counter how their day is, and they will look you in the eye most likely.
Yeah, they'll
when
look
they
at
answer.
you. Oh, wow. It's beautiful. Okay, so I will finish the sentence someday.
Okay.
I have a lot of questions about hormones. Shall we go into the hormones?
Let's go. Hormones take up a lot of my regular day-to-day conversations. So
most people in my sphere are pretty curious if they're in perimenopause or not. Those who are AFAB, they're like, is this happening? How do I know if it's happening? Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, perimenopause will happen to everyone with ovaries. So if you have ovaries, it will happen to you. It will probably happen sometime as early as 38, as late as like mid 40s. And it's super variable, right? Like perimenopause and menopause are so different. Like some people just like coast through and they barely notice anything and everything is fine. And those people are magical unicorns and we love them. And like, if that's you, like take a bathroom break, go make some tea, come back later. Like, or listen, because everybody else is like struggling a lot. So like one of the like really obvious things, right, is just menstrual cycle length. And this only applies to if you're not like on birth control or have like a hormonal IUD that's like pretty much got you not bleeding, right? Like if you have regular periods under your own steam, then just looking at period length is an easy way to do that. Early perimenopause, sometimes cycles just get a little bit shorter, sometimes longer, not like weeks off, right? Like the like, I don't ovulate for a couple of months and so don't have periods for a couple months comes like later. So just like short changes in cycle length or just differences in cycle quality. So sometimes that's heavier bleeding, sometimes that's lighter bleeding. Kind of early signal, right? Like not everybody has that. And so other pieces tend to be a little more like nuanced, right? Like a lot of people come in and they're like, I feel different. I am angry at everyone. And I think objectively, like I like my family just fine, but I am so irritable. Like, please help me not murder my family. So there's definitely like a little bit of an emotional component that kind of comes up. Like later perimenopause, also we get those like vasomotor symptoms. So like hot flashes, night sweats, like those kinds of pieces. Like those are really obvious, right? Like if you wake up drenched with sweat, like every night, like ta-da, perimenopause. But the other pieces like can be a little more nebulous, right? And like part of that is like perimenopause has like it's sort of like hallmarked by like less regulated hormonal cycles. So sometimes you have more hormones and sometimes you have less hormones. And so that's where like the bleeding weirdness comes in. Like sometimes you have tons of hormone and you bleed really heavily. Sometimes you have very little and you don't bleed a lot. But that same thing like affects mental health, it affects mood, it affects connective tissue, like it affects the whole body. So I'd say like if you are like in the proximity of 40 or up and like you feel like things are significantly changing for like no obvious reason, like maybe put perimenopause on your list of question marks for what it is, right? And if it's really obvious, like bleeding super weird or like you're having hot flashes, a lot of people will start just having hot flashes in like the second half of their cycle. So they'll sort of get like luteal phase hot flashes and then they'll be like, oh, it's gone. Like, no, wait, it's back, right? Like those are kind of the more obvious things where we can kind of like hang our hat on it. I think the like thing I would want people to know also is like there's so much you can do in perimenopause, like before you get even to like menopausal treatments, right? Which a lot of what we do now is like just hormone treatments because we have realized the Women's Health Initiative was not well interpreted and they're a lot safer than we thought 20 years ago. But even before then, like there's so many other pieces of like herbs that can help with hormonal regulation, hormones get complicated. Maybe ask me specific questions or I'll just talk for the next hour.
Okay. So to pull on the thread that you just said, that there are herbs you can take for hormonal regulation. Specifically, I assume these are going to be different for different hormones.
Totally. A lot of herbs have like pretty specific effects, right? Like we use Vitex if we're trying to like get progesterone to be a little bit more robust. Like Vitex also helps with like PMS symptoms and acne and all of these other pieces. Like maca is kind of a good for most everybody.
Maca root?
Herb that helps. Yeah, maca root.
Oh, it just smells so bad. But I'll take it. Yeah.
Really? Like I feel like maca is super neutral tasting. Like I have a lot of patients who like dump it in their coffee.
Oh my God.
This is not for you.
No.
Capsule format only. I mean, it could be you don't like the smell. Totally possible.
I think it's probably the smell. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, things can smell different than they taste for sure. So like kind of like figuring out like where things are, right? And some of it, like if it's like hot flashes, like yes, like hormonal support and like black cohosh and all of these like lovely herbs are useful, but sometimes you just want to do like blood vessel support, like citrus bioflavonoids, and hormone stuff too. Always like, I feel like almost everything in naturopathic medicine, like eventually someone will be like, but it's the gut, it's digestion. And I'm like, there's a little bit that's true, right? Like if you're producing a lot of hormone and your liver is having a hard time processing that all, you're going to have more symptoms. If you are not eliminating waste really well, your body is so resourceful. It'll just go like digging around in there in the garbage and be like, ooh, I could use that. Ooh, I could use that. Right. So you'll get like, if you're like constipated or like not moving, your body would be like, oh, I could take that, like that little estrogen byproduct, I'll take that back, like let's keep it in circulation. So sometimes like what we're doing is just kind of like making sure like the liver's not all backed up doing other stuff and that like digestion is functioning and that you're like sleeping and as de-stressed as a human with a life can reasonably be, while we're also kind of playing with like hormone specific things.
Okay. I have a pretty specific question. If you do have ovaries, what are common signs of increased testosterone, and what might that be indicative of?
Really classically in people with ovaries with like high T, like you'll see kind of like virilizing things which tend to be like hair growth in like male pattern places. So like facial hair, chest hair, abdominal hair. Acne is a really common one as well. And then irregular cycles can also be a component of that. I think typically what we're looking at there is like the question mark of like, is there like PCOS is kind of our most common high testosterone condition. But
I can hear you typing.
I was like, I want to like look at this one thing.
Okay.
I was like, I have this one chart that I like, that looks at it. Cause like the other things are like kind of like bonkers, right? Of like, you can have like, adrenal tumors, right? There's this like, I'm not going to find my chart. That's okay. There's, adrenal hyperplasia, right? Where like your adrenal gland is like making too much. There's like imbalances in other systems. You can have like enzymatic issues where you're like converting inappropriately. So I'd say like either an adrenal issue or an ovarian issue. Sometimes pituitary issues like signaling downwards. It's a wide variety of things, but I'd say like getting those checked and then like screening for PCOS would be first on my list.
Is that a blood panel?
That's a blood test. Yeah. 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 Cause like if there's high testosterone, like you want to look at ovarian function, you want to look at pituitary signaling, and then you want to look at adrenal function. Because if you have ovaries, it's not your gonads who make your testosterone. It's your adrenal glands who's making that. But hormones can convert into each other, right? So like testosterone can turn into estrogen, and they can change forms through the powers of hormones.
Amazing. Also, okay, this is like a little bit off topic, but also not, because I missed the birth of Mel's son Kiran by like 12 hours because I couldn't get on a plane early enough, which was sublimely irritating. But I did get to spend a couple weeks up there during the first 2 weeks of Kiran's life. And that's when I learned about the magic of breast milk. It is literally witchcraft.
100%. That's witchcraft.
What the fuck?
There's this cool thing in science that like is mostly looking at mammals that talks about like the maternal dyad, like in which like the mother and infant animal are basically functioning as a single unit. And I love it so much because like all of the weird things that like babies do, like refuse to be soothed if you're sitting down, but immediately quiet if you stand up, like there's a scientific basis for that. Like,
oh, how annoying.
It's a real thing. Yeah, exactly. No, breast milk is magic. You're like sampling the baby, giving the baby exactly what it needs. If the baby is sick, you produce antibodies and give them back to the baby to fight off whatever it has. Like breast milk is magic. I was using the story of the day you left to like talk to a patient about like hormones postpartum the other day.
Oh, remind me.
Oh, I just like cried dramatically. Like there was like, it was like comedic sobbing where I just remember being like, I'm not actually this sad. Like I promise I'm not this sad, but I was like crying as if like I was like, you were gonna like leave and go to another planet and take my baby with you. And like, if, like my life was over, like everyone I loved was gone. Like it was like the most dramatic sobbing. And I was like, I'm not this sad. I'm not this sad.
Okay. Yes.
Where I was like a small amount of sad, but my body was just like, and now we will sob hysterically. I'm like, you might actually like feel like your emotions are like bigger than they even are. They are like, just roll with it and like call me if you feel like the sadness doesn't go away.
And crying is good. I think crying is also witchcraft.
Crying is also witchcraft. The chemical constituents of your tears change based on what kind of crying you're doing. Yeah. The body is full of witchcraft.
My dad taught me when I was a kid that when I was sad, my tears had protein in them, or at least a different kind of protein. And
yeah,
I
like
never forgot
the
that.
studies of like the crystalline structure, like the actual shape changes, like based on whether a person is like sad or happy or angry. So bizarre.
That's so cool. You know so many cool things. Okay. Well, let me look into. Oh, you'll love this. Okay. A friend asked, what would you recommend for someone who's starting a healing journey with a naturopathic doctor who is told, trust your body's ability to heal itself when that's really difficult? And I think the context of your life, both as a gymnast and a dancer, and the writing on the wall that is extremely not writing on the wall. It's extremely loud and everyone hears the sound of the relationship then with bodies and ignoring what they're telling you. Yeah, so that's always been really irritating for me when people are like, just trust your body. I'm like, you don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, so like in body trust, right? Like we're like telling people like engage with like interoception, right? So like engage with the signals that you're getting from your body. And I mean, that's honestly inherently like a very privileged place to be. Like that would like imply that you don't have any trauma that would interact with this whole process. It would imply a level of like neurotypical brain body communication. It would imply that you don't have a sensory processing disorder. It would imply that like things are fully functional in there. And it would imply that your body has historically given you correct data. And that's not always true, right? Like sometimes the signal we get from our body is easily misinterpreted. And so I think that like in the context of trust your body, I mean, like we can all inherently trust our bodies as long as we have a brainstem, like to breathe, to make protein out of broken down amino acids to filter our blood and then pee out, extra. I think there's some like really baseline, like building block pieces where like we know our body will do those things, but trusting ourselves to like get input from our body and then act on it is like inherently really easily damaged. And I think some of the most telling research that I've seen looks at interoception and mental health. And we see that when people are having difficulties in mental health, they tend to have very low interoception. They're not getting body signals and they don't trust body signals, right? And so like, like I was socialized female in the US and I came up in sports where body mass mattered, right? So I was just spoon fed an eating disorder, as probably were many of the people who are listening right now. I would assume that like aerial sports, like all others, like it's a strength to weight ratio to some extent, right? Like it's true of climbing, right? Like there's, like all of these areas are sort of like rich in that. Although there were some fun articles this year where they're like, it turns out if you just feed female runners, they run faster and farther and are stronger. And I'm like, good job, modern science. Like, so I think that like, if someone tells you to like trust your body and that inherently feels like bullshit to you because you either have had to ignore your body signals to achieve goals because you were told that's how to do it, or because you haven't gotten accurate body signals or whatever else it is, like it's a really slow process, right? That like is going to require like you to like learn some neutrality, like in listening, right? Because I think that like going from especially mistrust of your body to like body acceptance and body love is like, that's a big pendulum swing.
Yeah.
To like,
it's really irritating.
It's like a big pendulum swing. And like, it helps to really start small to like, can you like sit quietly and like notice sensations of your body and like not judge them, right? Like, can you just sit quietly and be like, my left shoulder blade feels itchy and I really want to move my right wrist and I think I'm hungry. Like, can you just sort of like hear those things and be like, oh, okay, like those are the things that are happening, right? And like building up a little practice with that, whether that's like being willing to eat when you're hungry, or recognizing fatigue symbols, or even recognizing your stress symbols, right? Recognizing that your like shoulders are up by your ears, or that your fists are clenched, or that, you're doing like some stimming behaviors or some like calming behaviors, right? And like we all do this. Like my tell that I've noticed doing medicine is like when patients are telling me really distressing things and it's going on for a long time, like I like pet my left thumb with my right thumb. Like, that's just my like, I am listening to this thing and it's pretty intense and I'm just going to sit here and like pet my thumb. Like, so that I feel better, right? Like everybody has little things, but like as soon as you notice it, right? Like now for me, I'm like, oh, okay. Like I'm doing the little like, it's okay, they're there thing. Like this is feeling pretty activating. And like, do I need to hear this story, or is this person now just ranting and rambling and I actually want to pull them back to the question I asked them? Like, what's happening here in this moment? Where am I in this moment? Am I still listening to them, or am I now like thinking about me? So kind of just figuring some of those pieces out. And I think just like learning, right? Of like, go read the books, like go read The Body Keeps the Score, or go read When the Body Says No, like go read things that tell you about the weird ways our bodies like go awry in this process. And then like treat your body like a toddler, right? Like toddlers are full of knowing about things with no prefrontal cortex, right? Of like, when they're hungry, they're flipping out. Like they don't know what they want, right? Of like, if you start sort of like getting signals from your body and you sort of start just like treating it like a toddler, to be like, oh, what's happening? Like, I think maybe you're thirsty. Let's go have a snack. Do you need to rest?
I love that.
Of like having like a little bit of a relationship, right? Like, and like if you've ever had a significant injury, right? Like, like sometimes you start to kind of like anthropomorphize that part of your body, where you sort of like talk to it differently, or you think about it as this like independent part of yourself of like, how's shoulder doing today? Like, can we do this shoulder? Like, let's try this. Oh, nope, shoulder didn't like that, right? Like give your whole body an identity. I joke with people about this all the time. I'm like, listen, I'm like, you have this body. I'm going to need you to take it for walks. You would take your dog for a walk, so I'm going to need you to take your body for a walk. Just like start a little chat with this like creature, and like listen to the really clear requests of like, if you're tired, if you're hungry, if you want to be in a different space, if you want to move, those are really obvious. Like you can do something. And if your body's giving you signals and you're like, I don't trust these signals, just notice them. Just like name them, be like, I'm experiencing this. And then you can even like use your brain to think about it and be like, well, I wonder why I'm feeling this way. Like, could it be this or this or this? I don't know. How curious, right? And like over time, as you track that, like it sort of starts to coalesce into like something, right? And some of it's just being okay with the signals that you get and being comfortable, right? Like people who are like, oh my gosh, every time I have a palpitation, I think I'm dying. I'm like, well, your heart's going to keep doing that. So we got to figure out how we shift that to be like, oh, that's an interesting thing that's happening. Oh, look, it already went away. I'm fine. So
I love that. Just have a relationship. It's the same advice I give people about like forming relationship with their creativity. Like you have to pay attention to it, and it's like making friends with like anything.
Totally. And it's like, and if you have like a neurospicy brain, I'm like, maybe your body doesn't give you the signals that like it theoretically should. And so maybe you just need like a little framework for checking on it, to be like, oh, hey, do you need anything in there? Like, did I feed you recently? Like, have you moved? Do you actually need to pee? Like,
I always need to pee. Oh, okay. Oh, I'm just completely exploiting my access to you in this moment. So I read recently that drinking just water isn't going to hydrate you, and you should put a sprinkle of Himalayan sea salt in your water, and then you will pee less. Thoughts?
You will pee less if you have electrolytes in your water. Basic laws of chemistry is that water follows solute. And so in this case, the solute is salt. The same thing would work for sugar. Like if you think about like what is Pedialyte, it's a fuck ton of like salt and sugar and other electrolytes. And yeah, so electrolytes in water, absolutely better hydration. Your body will actually be able to keep the water, right? If you just put in lots of water and you don't put any extra like solute in there, like your body's going to be like, too much water. Let's pee it off. But if you put salt in there, your body can hang on to more of it.
Fair point. And
there's so much salt in here.
Oh, really?
There's so much salt in here.
Can you? Okay. One of the rules of thumb that I read was if you can taste it, there's too much.
I think that like if you put like straight up electrolytes in your water and you don't think it tastes salty, you probably are severely dehydrated.
Oh.
Like if you're like, this tastes like nothing and you've got like 500 milligrams of salt in there, like problems, right? So I think there's a big difference between like rehydrating, like for sports, right? Like you are going to go sweat a bunch and you want to like replete to the like multiple hundreds of milligrams up to like gram levels of salt because you're just like pouring all the sweat out of your body. Like that's different than like I'm adding a sprinkle of electrolytes. My rule of thumb is like, if for the first couple of sips, you're like, this is salty, like that's totally fine. If you feel like it's salty the whole time you're drinking and it doesn't neutralize, like that's probably like where there's too much, but like you should notice there being salt in your water. Like that's a flavor situation you got going on there. Like if you feel like you just like every time you take a sip of water, like you just got knocked off a surfboard and popped up with a mouthful of the ocean, like that might be too much salt in your water. But
that's how chemicals work.
Right. Well, and that's why like
taste them.
Well, and that's why like all the electrolyte things have flavors and like stevia and like they're like, here's grapefruit, here's strawberry lemonade. It's because otherwise you'd be like, this water is kind of weird. Like I think that like in general, right, like mineral waters, things like that, like they don't have a strong mineral thing. They just taste better to us. But that's like kind of different than like rehydration level. But yeah, no, humans need minerals. Like we should not be drinking distilled water. That is not found in nature. It is not for us.
No, yeah, bad idea.
unless you have kidney stones or like blood pressure issues, you know, like there's reasons why you would like maybe not go hard on salt. But I think we've realized we need salt.
Well, that leads me to a next question that is super relevant to you also. Right. Yes. It is an ask for advice for daily supplements or recovery recommendations for those of us who are athletes and getting older and want to continue doing all of the things for as long as possible. Especially as like the advent of your love for climbing has become a big part of your life. And we have had many discussions on pull-ups as a result.
I know. Well, I mean, I had not needed pull-ups since childhood gymnastics. And all of a sudden I was like, I need a lot of pull-ups. Like I need to do so many. I mean, and I do them now. Mm-hmm. Like now there are pull-ups and like finger strength training. So, I mean, I think that your modality, right, will dictate a little bit of like what you need, but like things I think about with aging, right, like is going to be a little bit different sort of depending on what system you're using, right? So like testosterone like tends to like dip much later, like for folks with testosterone predominant systems. And so like y'all are mostly fine for a while, but like when we like sort of circle back to the like, oh man, perimenopause, like what's happening here, right? The thing I think about for my like cis female or like folks with ovaries is like there's a point in time where like anabolic hormones go downhill a little bit because estrogen is an anabolic hormone, right? Like she's running around telling bones to be strong and muscles to be big and blood vessels to be dilated, you know, like she's a friggin' boss. You know, so I think about just like maintaining muscle mass as being like a really important component for folks as they age. I think for most people, like creatine is like a reasonable thing to think about around just like maintaining some muscle mass. I think a lot too about overtraining as well. I think that when we're young, like, you know, one, you're made of elastic, two, you think you're immortal, right? Like it's easy to overtrain and still recovery. I think the recovery period becomes so important, right? Of like, you can't lift heavy 6 days a week. Or you need a very careful rotation of body parts so that you're actually like giving your muscles like a couple of days of rest if you're trying to like do hypertrophy training, right? If you're just doing strength training, you can do it every day. Your muscles will still get stronger. But having actual restfulness. I use a lot of adaptogens in athletes as they're training. And so kind of all of those like ashwagandha, rhodiola, maca, all of those things like have some like overlap in athletic performance as well as in hormonal support. So just thinking about like how you're going to spend your cortisol, right? Because training is stress. Mm-hmm. It's good stress. It's stress that makes us stronger. It's stress that makes us better at our sports or our arts, but it is still stress for the body, right? And so like, how are we spending that? If we're going to spend our like daily allotment of stress on training, we need to make sure it's balanced with like restfulness and other arenas of life. But yeah, I'd say like body mass, like connective tissue support is another component, like high protein. I think everyone's on the protein train. Some people are too far on the protein train, but I think everybody's on the protein train at this point.
What about supplementary collagen? Does that even do any good to be ingested?
There are some studies on collagen that have some nuances that I'm not 100% like fresh on, but some of them were like, if you consume collagen and then do a workout that challenges connective tissue, like they see collagen going into those connective tissues and helping build more robust tissues. And so there was sort of like a time association with like supplementation and training that came out of these. I think, you know, at worst, you're just consuming a very haphazard scramble of amino acids that your body will build proteins out of. Whether or not they're connective tissue is up to your body, not up to you, the person scooping it into your beverage. But if you're consuming collagen around workouts, the chances that it goes into connective tissue are pretty good. And so is a pretty reasonable one to have on board.
Okay. Can we take a second here to add the caveat, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, but that collagen isn't a complete protein, so it shouldn't be used as a substitute.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a very, very incomplete protein.
So
So
supplement.
sort of my comment is so kind of like worst case scenarios, you've got some extra amino acids, but it's definitely not going to like substitute out for that. And there are some companies that do sort of veganish sort of combinations where they're like vegan collagen-ish, right? Where they just get like really high proline, like they just sort of like make the sort of amino acid combination that's in collagen. Because the other piece of collagen too is like, where is this coming from? Like, what animal is this? Are you allergic to this animal? Like, did you want to be consuming this animal? So collagen is, from animals. So if that bothers you, it's not for you. But there's like, good amino acid supplementation around that.
You heard it here first, or for the 18th time of the day. Okay.
Totally. I think one other thing I would say to answer that question is like body work, right? Of like find a person who can like really like touch base on like fascial patterns and tension that like as we're aging, like we just want to be super mindful of like patterns in our body that are going to like either be in our favor or affect us adversely. And so like having some people on your team who can like help you with the weird things your body do when you're trying just to like get through all of your daily activities is super helpful. That like not just like a massage that pets you, but someone who's like, oh, like we're holding a lot of tension here, you have fascial restrictions here, just to like kind of keep you in like good working order.
That does sound like a glorious luxury to have a body worker who's familiar with your body and who you see over and over again. Clearly,
yeah, it's like you don't have to like get a massage every week, but if you have someone who knows your body, even if you see them like acutely for injuries, I mean, this could also just be like a PT, who's like got your back, who you can touch base with. But I think like, the skill set that like comes with people who do body work is pretty broad. So figuring out what works for you is nice.
Thank you.
Yes.
I know.
What else?
Okay. Have you ever had to address barriers to care within gender nonconforming communities, especially in regards to hormonal and OBGYN issues?
I'm really, really lucky because I live in the state of Washington. And so I don't have a lot of barriers to care for my patients. I do gender affirming care, and like other than like long wait lists for like surgical procedures, like it's really possible here for folks, including like gynecologic surgeries, like access to hormones, all of that. So I would say like the main place I really struggle with like getting care for my patients actually centers around obesity. Of like I have had to work harder than usual to gain access to care for my patients who are in bigger bodies. Like a lot of surgeons have like BMI cutoffs for procedures and things like that. So I'd say like that's actually the arena in gender affirming care where I feel like I've had to really like go to bat for people. Like the hardest is like getting people access to care when surgeons are saying like, nope, my BMI cutoff is 35. And I'm like, well, my patient's BMI is 50 and they're not going to get to 35. And like, let's talk about your concerns. Like, I'm sure they are valid. And so is my patient's desire for this procedure. And I think it's in their best interest to let's figure it out, but I also like, I have patients who come over from Idaho. I have patients who come for care from other places, or I have a lot of patients who have moved to Washington from other places like the South, to be able to get the care they want, feel safe. So, I mean, I think that's like a rough part of it, right? Is that like I practice in this like privileged land, but I see what happens. Like I went to the UCSF has a gender affirming care conference, and the last time I was there was a year or two ago. And instead of being this like educational, like here is all the things, a lot of it was like, here's all the programs that are getting shut down. Here's how we're going to transition out of our program. Here's what we've lost in our state, and here's how we're going to manage it. And it was like really, it was a little bit of a bummer.
Yeah.
Of a conference, you know, and it's like there's so much nuance to this, right? And I think everybody gets real squirreled out about kiddos, and like that's like an area of myth busting that I think we'd need several more podcasts to, to cover. And I'm like, this is like the things people say are happening are not happening. But yeah, I think that like if you want hormones, like there's not a lot of true contraindications for hormones, right? Other than like a hormone sensitive cancer in your body or something, you know, like there are not a lot of true contraindications to gynecologic procedures, right? Including like if you don't want to have the parts that you have, or you want to not bleed, you know, like whatever it is, like there's not a lot of contraindications to those things. So like if you need a different doctor, you just need a different doctor to help you go get those things. And sadly, in some states, like maybe you want to take a long vacation and visit your friend in a different state. But there's a network in every state. So you just got to find those people who will help you get what you need.
Find the network.
Yeah, you got to find the network. It exists. It's there. It might be real backed up. If there's only like 2 people who do the thing that you want, like it might be 2 years before you get it, which is sucky, but they're there.
Yeah. Okay. Is there any...
I want a happy question for the end.
No, I'm going to.
You're like, now we're just like, oh.
You're like, everything's terrible. Okay. I have two more questions, but you will like this. Okay. You will like this. So Mel is an expat Southerner. And what I realized when I was texting you earlier, your icon on my phone is still you eating an enormous piece of cornbread. And Mel is the first person who taught me how to make bread, which was a surprise. This doesn't have anything to do with the question. I just remember walking into you in 80's apartment. You're wearing a fucking apron, which just did not go in my head. Your hands are covered in flour. You're mad at me because, to be fair, I deserved it often, and we fought a lot during that period of time in our lives. But then there you are, covered in flour, wearing an apron. I'm like, what are you doing? And you said, I am baking bread. I'm like, you know how to bake bread? And you said, yes, one must have an array of mysterious talents at all times, and then turned around and walked away from me. And like huffed into the kitchen. I'm like, oh shit. And then you taught me how to bake bread.
Amazing.
Oh, I didn't even ask you the question, did I? I just started talking about bread because that's like beautiful memory.
It's like cornbread? Am I still pro cornbread? Is that a question?
Well, I'm curious how necessity dictates, as we've said, that you live elsewhere, even though I know you've expressed that you wish you could practice at least in North Carolina in the mountains because you really enjoyed living there. So how do you feel like you can remain connected to the culture here, for lack of a better word? The cornbread, Mel.
I ate collard greens for breakfast. Does that count?
Yes, it does. I mean, I assumed food would be somewhere in the answer.
Yeah, I think food is a big part of it. And like what I've like robustly realized having left it is like so much of what I thought was like Southern culture is actually Southern Black culture. And the rest of us just like get to like go along and enjoy all of like that cultural richness. So I'm like, wait a minute, like black eyed peas are like African and like this whole, it's like, dang it. Like, well, you know, it's never too late to realize these things.
The music as well, all of it.
All the music.
All of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think in those ways, right, of like, there's just a lot of like the ways that like, you know, like I use my grandmother's, you know, canning equipment, right? It was like I play all the games of southernness in that way, and like I get to engage with people in the way that like I was raised to engage with people, which is really different than the way people engage here. And that's kind of like the fun of like my medical practice is like, I'm like, I get to do whatever I want now. Like I'm not in a big system anymore. I can like sit down and talk to people for a friggin' hour, and like get their whole story and do the thing. So I think like the things that I love and value about the South, like are easy to transfer, and that like I like how people engage with each other in the South. I like how they care for each other in the South. Like Kiran's kindergarten teacher is our neighbor, and we take him like all kinds of things and trade, like we made apple butter. Here is apple butter for you. We picked chanterelles. Here's a bag of chanterelles. Like, and they respond in kind. Like it's sort of building the sense of community that we had there in the same way. And eating biscuits, of course, like, yes. And cornbread and lots of collard greens, and then going to the South often. We took Kiran climbing outside of Asheville, like at Looking Glass this year.
Oh,
and
wow.
He like crushed it. And like watching him respond to like climbing in the Blue Ridge Mountains, it's so different. It's so beautiful. He was just like, this is amazing. Like, look at the view. It's like giant slabs of granite sticking out of the earth. Like hunks of quartz in there. Like just reconnecting and like spending time there for sure.
Okay, I have one more question.
Okay.
But it's specific because there's the question of what advice would you give to your younger self, but I'm really curious about what advice, either as a medical professional or otherwise, would you give to, let's say, the Mel that was wearing the apron and covered in flour. That age, that version of you. What advice would you give them?
If I could like gift the perspective of time to my younger self, I think that now I operate from this idea that like we should always be doing our future selves a solid, like what can I do for like 60-year-old me is like a question I ask myself, right? If I could get like, I don't know, how old was I in this memory? Like 20?
Yeah, let's say 20. Yeah.
Could I get like 20-year-old me to like build some better bone density so that like 40-year-old me wasn't like jumping every time I go to the gym to try to coast into menopause like with sturdy bones? Like, could she eat some calcium and take a vitamin D supplement?
I like that. That's good.
I mean, I'd also tell her to like invest her money and assume that she will live past 30.
Oh yeah,
but but yeah, no, I think I'd tell her to like. I think like I hear it a lot too, where it's like, there's no point in investing your money, like the world's going to end. I'm like, well, if it does, like money won't help you anyway, because there's going to be like armed gangs roving the streets and like you're going to die. And I'm like, but what if it doesn't end and then you like retire and have money because you invested it? Either one could happen, right? I think the same way about health of like, what if you just pretend that you're going to live to be really, really old, and so you're going to need a really good cardiovascular system, and you're going to want really good bones, and you're going to want to put a lot of muscle on, right? Like, be like, do future me some solids. Think about me when you make health choices.
This is very good advice. Yeah. My basic tenet now, and every time I see my personal trainer, which is like, it's only once a week, but then I do things on my own. He's like, what are your goals today? Is it the same? I'm like, yes, I want as much meat as possible. All the muscle mass that I can put on. Please and thank you. That's my insurance plan.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, like, I definitely like go rogue in my practice where I'm like, like we don't do DEXs on people until they're like old and postmenopausal. And I'm like, why wouldn't we do DEXs on like 45-year-olds? They still have time to build bone density. I'm like, let's look for low bone density while you still can jump up and down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do more weight bearing exercise, So I think that just kind of having those like future plan thoughts is what I would gift. I don't think I could make her less snarky.
Oh, and why would you?
But
sure.
I appreciate the spice that is in that story.
So do I.
was like, I need to like, do I have mysterious talents now? Like,
Are you kidding? Are you kidding? Don't even. Yeah. You might not be
I
aware
have
of
the
them.
mysterious talent. Probably not. Well, I thought it was very funny listening to your last guest talk about like setting anchors on ice, and like everything is tracking completely fine for me because it's not dissimilar to like building anchors like on rocks. And I was like, oh, this is tracking. I was like, oh, that's a secret power to like understand anchor building.
Yes.
Meanwhile, you were losing your mind because it's
too cold.
I mean, it makes sense.
It's cold.
I just started sweating again just thinking about it.
I mean, that's like understandable.
Yeah. I'm glad you were here.
Yeah, this was fun.
I didn't mean to make this over an hour, but it happened kind of effortlessly. So thanks for hanging in there.
Oh, all good. I feel like all of these things are things that I could have talked a lot longer on. So thanks for wrangling me into conciseness.
And for those of you who are like looking for the link to their Instagram, you don't get one because they don't participate in the social mediums.
I don't. I let other people do that for me, professionally speaking, and it's a great luxury to not have to do that for myself.
So they will remain in a mystery somewhere in Seattle, just floating around. Know that they exist.
Like if you live in Washington, come see me. I'll bill your insurance. It'll be great.
Okay.
I'm not unavailable. Yeah. Like, there's like special caveats, right? Like if you're like, gender nonconforming in the deep South and like have burning questions, like hit up Rachel. Like,
you know where to find me.
I will consider. Exactly. I was like, I will jump in. But Thank you. I think hopefully there's resources near folks.
Hopefully so, but y'all know where to find me on Instagram at Rachel Strickland Creative or on Patreon at Rachel Strickland Creative. So if that is the case, since Mel said it, you just go ahead and let's do this again sometime.
I'm around. That would be fun. I'll also give you like some like naturopathic physician like directories where you can like find people near you who like went to school, hold licenses, like practice close to you. Like I can provide some like resources to find folks to talk to as well.
Thank you. That would be very helpful.
Totally.
Okay, darling. Enjoy your cornbread.
Thank you. You too.
Talk soon.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. That episode was almost an hour and a half, but it was so nice just to have Mel come on and answer all of the questions and share all of their plentiful knowledge. And, I'm always going to enjoy telling stories about our time dancing together as well. If you have ideas or requests for future episodes, you can reach me always on Instagram at Rachel Strickland Creative or on Patreon at Rachel Strickland Creative. This podcast is powered by Patreon, so extra warm, squishy thank yous to my wonderful patrons for standing with me and for making this podcast and so much more that I do possible. Thank you. Now y'all go drink some water and don't go back to sleep.